Hello, everybody, and welcome to your book review for June. Now, this month, I'm going to try and keep it short as possible because we're going to be talking here about one of probably my favorite books, which is um, The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So, this is by far probably my second favorite book after Rich Dad Poor Dad in the personal finance space. It is such a fantastic book. And if you haven't read it through the last month, I would highly recommend you go out, get the book, take the time to read it. It's not a difficult read. Um, but I've kind of tried to distill this as ever down to sort of top 5 points that I took away from the book. Please do excuse me looking over there. That's again where my notes sit on my computer. But I want to run through what I feel are the biggest lessons from this book. Okay. And the first one is probably one of the more important lessons, which is having money, having financial success has got very little to do with intelligence. There is no correlation between IQ and success. And you can walk into any university, and no disrespect to educators, I have a lot of respect for them. I have a lot of friends who work in that space. But you can walk into any university, and there are professors with an IQ certainly higher than mine that are definitely not at the same level potentially that I'm at. And this just brings it home that it's more about your patience, your temperament, how you approach things, your mindset, that and your discipline. That these are the things that matter. It's not about IQ. It's not about being some mathematical genius. You know, investing is relatively simple. Yes, you have to have a vague idea, but if you can count to 10 and work out a percentage, the likelihood is you can invest to a good degree of success. That's one of the top lessons that I really like. Second one is obviously compounding. Now, compounding is talked about again and again and again and again in every space because ultimately that is the thing that will bring you wealth. You know, when we look at property as an example, one of the elements that makes it so successful is the fact that it is compounding without our investing any time, energy, or effort. Now, yes, we manage a tenancy. Yes, we look after our tenants. Yes, we maintain our properties. But the value of that property going up over time, and although I'm not a hugest fan of relying on equity growth, that is where a lot of our wealth will come from long term because the likelihood is it will happen. But that compounding we don't have to do anything. It just happens. Same as if we're investing in the stock market. Yes, it's about timing, but the reality is it's the time in the market, not timing the market, that is what makes sense. And that is true across almost every asset class that you can invest in for growth. On that, the third one is tail events drive everything. And this is the idea that you have to, going back to the point I just made, you have to be in the market to pick up on the gains. You will not be able to time the events of the market to take the gains. Now, I can't remember exactly what it was, but going back to 2024, it's something like the majority of gains in any of the indexes that you look at were made in something like 12 days. Now, but you had to be in the market for 365 days. And it's the same with property. If you are, if you're trying to time when the market does a bit of a correction, when's the peak of the market before the next correction to sell houses, you're going to have a problem. But just being in the market is the thing that's going to drive your success. And this is, there's many ways that you can apply this rule. It's time in the market. It's making sure that you have a diversified investments, because if you've got a 5 to, Ray Dalio talks about this, we won't talk about that now, but if you've got a 5-to-1 win ratio, so in other words, if you look at property, you've got 5 properties. If one's doing particularly well, 3 are doing average and one's not doing too well, you will still make money. And that's the thing. It's about creating that diversified portfolio, diversified in size, diversified in asset class, whatever the case may be. But it's really, really, really down to this idea that it's a few events, a few wins that are going to drive most of your wealth. And it's not something we like to talk about because there's a whole IFA type consulting culture out there that that are driven by this idea that they are the ones that are responsible for the success, but it's never event within their control. You go to a managed fund, it's the outside things that are going to drive that market up or down in any asset class. So that's the third one. It's just, understanding that it's these so-called tail events, these one-offs. Really good book on this I would recommend at some point is called, I've got it here, The Black Swan by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, Professor Taleb. Really, really good book about one-off events that we don't plan for. But coming back to the psychology of money, the fourth lesson is wealth is what you don't see. Huge fan of this. Obviously, we live in a very materialistic world. We live in a very social media world. It's all about the glitz, the glamour, and honestly, this is probably one of my favorite lessons. And that is, driving down the car in a Bugatti to impress other people is the most ridiculous thing in the world. If it's a small percentage of your net worth, or you have created an asset base that can pay for that vehicle, fine, do your thing. Everyone needs their sort of outlet. But this idea that we need to have a certain watch or a certain jewelry or certain car or wear certain clothes, it's just the most ridiculous idea in the world. And this is where true wealth, if you've ever come across, as I've been very fortunate to do, if you've ever come across like really, really, really high net worth individuals, you'll see that they could walk past you in the street and they'd look like anybody else. There is no indication that they are wealthy. And that, to me, when you meet with somebody and you can tell that they are wealthy, but you can't look at them and say, oh, they must be wealthy, that is a very big indicator of true wealth. And that's got to be true for everyone. I'm not saying don't have nice things, go for it, but make sure that you're not creating the impression of being rich. No, rich is rich. Rich is having disposable income. Wealthy is wealthy, security, financial security. So yeah, big lesson on wealth is not what you see. The fifth one is that you have to understand that you have different goals to everybody else. Okay, and again, particular to social media, which is a big, these sort of one hit, oh, do this thing, do this morning routine, invest in this thing, that may work for that person. So they can legitimately stand there and say that. However, the fact of the matter is what might work for them is very unlikely to work for you, certainly across everything that they do. And, this is particularly true in the financial world. What is, incentives? We often talk about incentives. And one of our goals with PLN actually was to make sure that our incentives were aligned with those of our clients, because you ultimately, if you are successful, we are successful. And that's what, this ethos that we want to carry through. It's not a one-hit wonder type psychology. And, understanding that when you go to somebody for advice, their goals are going to be different to you. So if they're saying, invest in this thing, and I'm not talking about coaching or guidance here, that's very different. If they have invested in X property, as an example, they've invested in property and it's worked for them, and they can guide you through that process, that's amazing. But if they are saying, oh, you need to buy this house, that's a different incentive. You need to buy this product, you need to buy this fund, you need to buy this share, you need to buy into Bitcoin, you need to buy into gold, you need to buy into silver. It's a very, very different dynamic. Their goals might be very, very different. So those are my 5 lessons. I mean, I could go on a few more, but honestly, I would, take the time, read this book, listen to Morgan Housel. He does a lot of the rounds on podcasts, he's got his own sort of, all the usuals, newsletter, etc. So I'd really, really recommend having a look at this, and let me know your thoughts. It's a change. It's very much a change in the personal finance space from sort of your standard finance-driven, numbers-driven type psychology book. So yeah, as I say, have a look, make sure, have a read, let me know your thoughts as you go through it. Now, the next book, the book that I want to read over the coming month or so, is this book, which is for me as a reread, which is The Power of Habit. And it's by Charles Duhigg. I think that's how you say the surname, Duhigg, sorry. Charles Duhigg, The Power of Habit. Really good book. Quite a simple book, as often these things are. How do but what are habits? Where do they come from? How do we manage them? And how do we create success? Not by replacing our habits. So have a read through. This is a bit of a longer book. The writing's a bit smaller. So what I'll do is I'll have a read through it. Hopefully I'll be done by the beginning of next month for your review in time, but it may be a little bit late. But I hope you enjoy that. Aurelia, Psychology of Money, 1,000,000%. Please go out, get it, read it, or listen to it if you prefer Audible. And you guys still haven't let me know what books you would like me to review, read, or have recommended to me. So hope you've enjoyed that. Hope that's helped. I hope that's either inspired you, or if you can share your thoughts if you've read the book. All right, everyone, have a happy day. See you soon. Bye-bye.